If you feel like your partner is absent, avoids certain topics, and isn't as emotionally involved as you'd like, you start seeking them out, insisting, and sometimes even becoming controlling. Your partner feels overwhelmed, uncomfortable, so they pull away even more, and that triggers your distress, anxiety, and urgency. And your way of dealing with it is to chase, ask, seek, and try to fix the issue right away, while their way of handling it is to withdraw, minimize, or even disappear. If this cycle sounds familiar, today we'll name it, and more importantly, break it, the anxious-avoidant dynamic. And please, this has nothing to do with one loving the other more, or one being toxic, or the other being a narcissist. It's about two conflicting emotional security strategies. One person seeks closeness to self-regulate while the other pulls away. And of course, when both people are stressed, anxious, and feeling vulnerable, their strategies become even stronger and they end up hurting each other. In this video, you're going to understand in depth how this dynamic works. You'll see how the cycle is created step by step. We're going to identify what each person thinks and feels on the inside, even if it looks different on the outside. And above all, we're going to build a practical plan to break the loop without anyone having to give in, put up with it, or suffer. First, an operational definition so we don't get lost. When we talk about the anxious partner, we mean a tendency to hyperactivate the attachment system, to seek closeness in response to ambiguous signals. Ambiguous signals like silences, changes in tone, fewer messages, less initiative, delayed responses. These are all cues that don't necessarily mean anything bad, but the anxious type tends to interpret them as danger, as a warning, so the anxious person's strategies get activated. They look for confirmation with a range of behaviors that can go from very subtle to very intense, depending on how insecure, anxious, and dysregulated the person feels. Checking, ruminating, asking, crying, seeking reassurance, asking for proof, chasing, controlling, holding on, confronting, protesting, accusing, and even attacking. Whatever the level of the behavior, the goal is not to hurt the other person, but to reduce that anxiety, that uncertainty, that insecurity. Many people have felt this way at some point, whether because of a history of insecure or ambivalent relationships, maybe with a parent, maybe with an ex-partner, maybe with friends. These experiences, these marks, can make you perceive and act with more anxiety in those areas. That is, the fact that you feel anxious or insecure in your relationship doesn't necessarily mean you have an anxious attachment style or that it's part of your personality. Maybe you feel safe and calm when it comes to romantic relationships, but when it comes to friendships, your fears and insecurities come up because you faced rejection and isolation. Or maybe you've always felt secure and calm in your romantic relationships, but your current partner has a more avoidant way of relating, and that's triggering all of this in you as a reaction. I'm mentioning this because when we talk about the anxious and avoidant dynamic, sometimes we can mistakenly assume that the person has to be anxious, or that the person has to be avoidant in their way of being, in their attachment style. But as I explained, it could be a relationship pattern learned in a certain context, in a type of relationship, or it could simply be our normal way of reacting here and now to the relationship pattern that the other person brings. Let's not assume that one already had an anxious attachment style and the other already had an avoidant attachment style when we notice this dynamic. I'm saying this because many times, for example, people come to my office telling me that they need help because they have anxious attachment. But when we start to explore what the relationship is like, how her partner interacts with her, you realize that this insecurity and anxiety are contextual. I mean, it would actually be strange if they felt calm and secure with the partner they have by their side. What needs to be worked on is the relationship, not yourself. You don't bring a problem. There's a problem in the relationship that's affecting you as the human being you are. I hope I've made this difference clear. Let's continue with the avoidant. When we talk about the avoidant partner, we're referring to a tendency to deactivate the attachment system, that is, the system of closeness. When they perceive too much demand or pressure from too many questions, intensity, the feeling that they can't breathe, can't think, can't decide. As with the anxious type, their self-regulation behaviors can range from mild to extreme. Giving less attention, minimizing problems, avoiding certain topics of conversation, keeping themselves busy and distracted with other things, distancing themselves, either emotionally or physically, even disappearing, wanting to end the relationship, sabotaging the relationship, or looking for reasons to pull away from the other person. The internal goal is not to punish the anxious person or make them suffer at all, as it is often mistakenly perceived. The aim is to lessen anxiety and discomfort and restore a sense of security and control. As I mentioned with the anxious partner, you can develop this way of managing the relationship at specific times, whether in a particular relational context. For example, there are people who only do this with their family members. It doesn't happen with their partners or friends. Response to having a relationship with a person with an anxious attachment style.
Almadina keeps claiming I broke up with her here and there, but she hasn't mentioned we've had problems for a year.
How can I tell the difference? How do I know if it's something I bring or if it's contextual? Well, generally speaking, if the pattern repeats itself in several relationships and over time, it's more likely to be your attachment style, something inherent to you. If it only shows up in one relationship, in one connection, and it gets better when we change the context, then it's probably something more contextual. So this dynamic can show up when two people with quote-unquote opposite attachment styles come together. So the truth is, the dynamic is going to be more complicated to manage. And it can also show up when only one of the members has that style, and the other one adapts as a response, as a reaction to the first, in which case change will be easier. But don't worry, whatever the case, the origin or the reason, this can be improved. Now let's get to the heart of the matter, to the loop. How is the anxious habitual cycle built? How does one member feed back into the other? And then we'll talk about how to break the loop. It almost always starts with a dose of stress, anxiety, distress, or discomfort in one of the two members. There may have been a disagreement, misunderstanding, or conflict between the two. This may come more from life factors, personal issues, family problems, problems at work, financial issues, health issues, whatever the case may be. When facing problems, stress, or discomfort, each person tends to try to regulate themselves through typical strategies. Some people, when feeling bad, seek support by talking and sharing with others. There are people who need to escape, entertain themselves, or get distracted, and there are others who prefer to isolate themselves, reflect, introspect, or rest. All strategies are valid as long as they don't cause problems or discomfort for anyone. But the thing is, when we talk about this anxious-avoidant dynamic, the anxious person will tend to seek support, company, and reassurance excessively, while the avoidant person will tend to withdraw, pull back, and seek refuge excessively. And that's how the cycle begins. Let's look at an example, which I think is important. It always makes things easier to understand. Anna is having problems with her business. Sales have been down for several months. Fixed expenses are eating up her cash flow, and she doesn't know if she'll be able to get out of this rough patch when she gets home. She doesn't feel like talking about it, she doesn't want to worry her partner, and she doesn't feel like doing anything either. What her body really wants is to lock herself in her office, sit down to work, sit down to reflect, to be alone with her thoughts. This makes her seem less affectionate, less cheerful, and less present at home. Her partner, Ricardo, knows that Anna has a stressful, demanding, busy, and difficult work life, but he can't help feeling insecure, anxious, and doubtful. When he sees that Anna is less affectionate and less present, he goes and asks her what's wrong, which is normal. Anna tells him she's just stressed at work, it's unrelated to their relationship, and he shouldn't worry. This calms Ricardo, but only on the surface, not completely, because Anna isn't giving him certainty. She doesn't say how she's going to take care of their relationship, and in the meantime, she doesn't mention when they'll be able to talk again after this time she needs alone. Yes, she told him she needs some distance, but doesn't give him certainty, security, or peace. As days pass, Anna remains distant and cold. Ricardo, in previous relationships, has experienced that before abandonment, there is always a stage of coldness, neglect, and distance. So, what used to calm this anxiety in the first days, which was thinking that it was because of work, little by little starts to lose strength, and he begins to feel and perceive what is happening as something more personal. He asks Anna again, pursues her, insists on her attention, and Anna, who already explained to him what was happening, starts to feel a bit invaded. She interprets Ricardo's demands as something overwhelming, since she already has to deal with her work problems, which are very complicated. So what she does is start coming home later and checking her phone less when she's out. Basically, she's avoiding encounters with Ricardo because she's afraid these dramatic situations will happen. This gives Anna some relief as she feels Ricardo is demanding too much and pressuring her, and she can't handle everything right now. But while this distance brings Anna relief, for Ricardo it only feeds and confirms his worst fears. Anna is distancing herself and doesn't love me like before. Our relationship has issues. So in the brief moments when Anna is at home and when he can approach her, Ricardo confronts her with greater intensity. And now his complaints are no longer about asking for explanations or confirmation that everything is fine between them. It's about blaming, accusing, getting angry, and even punishing. And this confirms Anna's worst fears as an avoidant. Being close to my partner is overwhelming, it's stressful, it's conflict. I need space, I need to separate, I need time to sort out my life on my own. So Anna decides to pack a small suitcase and goes to her sister's house for the weekend so she can think about her situation. Her intention is not to break up or to distance herself or to punish Ricardo, not at all. But at home, with their relationship issues, she feels overwhelmed and can't think clearly. She tells Ricardo not to worry, that they'll talk things over on Monday, but that she needs a few days alone. This time, she does give Ricardo certainty and reassurance, but Ricardo, on the other hand, needs to talk about the situation right now. He is very unsettled and wants to resolve things, for Anna to go back to being normal. Now Ricardo thinks she doesn't care about me. Anna thinks he's suffocating me. Who is to blame in this story? Well, regardless of who may have started the cycle, what's important here is that both of them are responsible for how all of this has escalated. Both of them have made mistakes. They've fueled the problem and they've done exactly what most unsettles their partner. So let's see now what can and should be done to stop and get out of this cycle. The first thing is to understand that you're not just arguing with your partner, you're actually arguing with an alarm system, your alarm and theirs. And when two alarms go off at the same time, and on top of that with contradictory signals, well, panic and collapse. That's why, before we talk about solutions and specific behaviors, we need to understand this. When you're emotionally triggered, when you're dysregulated, your brain doesn't look for truth, clarity, reason, or logic. It looks to eliminate possible threats and find safety. And to do that, it gives you quick, forceful options that can lower your anxiety and discomfort in the moment. So they're very tempting, but they'll probably cause you problems. Starting an argument, accusing, watching, controlling, punishing, jumping to conclusions, making quick decisions. That's why step 0 before anything else is this. Commit yourself to not making decisions about your reality or taking impulsive, forceful actions. When you're in threat mode, overwhelmed, anxious, because that's a recipe for disaster. First regulation, then conversation and action. Once you've learned step 0, let's move on to step 1, separating facts from interpretations. A fact is, he took a long time to reply to my WhatsApp. An interpretation is, he's ignoring me. A fact is, he asked me to leave him alone, while an interpretation is, he's trying to punish me. Why is this important? Because if your interpretation, my partner is abandoning me, your body already goes into alert mode and will ask you to do certain things. Second key, empathy. Yes, it sounds very basic, but let me explain it to you. Yes. When we feel bad, anxious, overwhelmed, or scared, it's really hard to get out of our own heads. And even more, it's hard to think about how the other person might be feeling and thinking, the person we're labeling as the cause of our discomfort at that moment. But remember, their actions aren't meant to hurt you. They come up as a defense against their own discomfort, just like you do other things as a defense when you're feeling bad. So in those moments, shifting your focus really helps. Switching from focusing on what that person is doing to me to focusing on what they might be thinking and how they might be feeling. This, on one hand, will greatly reduce your arousal and impulsiveness, and on the other hand, it will open doors to understanding and communication between you two. Because by knowing what each person feels and needs, we can then build alternatives to the important loop. As always, understanding and validating how the other person feels doesn't mean agreeing with them, giving in, or much less validating their behavior. It's about recognizing the emotion, not accepting the interpretation. I understand your fear and can think of ways to calm it, though I may not agree with your story. Understanding helps me respond and handle things. We need to ask better questions, not why are you doing this to me, but what's going on inside you? Not you don't love me anymore. It's a are you overwhelmed or worried about something? It's not a tell me the truth. It's a help me understand your inner state. To achieve this, there's a very interesting cognitive trick, which is to depersonalize the automatic reaction. In these moments, instead of thinking, my partner is doing this, it really helps to separate that alarm system from your partner. That is, to depersonalize, to separate the person from the alarm system, from the automatic reaction, from that anxious style or that avoidant style. Instead of thinking, my partner is doing this, I can think my partner's alarm system is doing this. I already know it, I know how it works, so I'm not going to fall into triggering my own alarm too. This really helps to reduce the pain, the anxiety, the resentment, and most importantly, to see your partner and yourself as a team, working together to reconfigure your alarm systems. And not seeing it as you and your partner fighting each other, but both of you fighting against an enemy, which is this alarm system we're talking about. I hope this is clear, as making this mental shift is crucial. The third key is not just about acting better when the problem comes up, which is also important, but even more important is to prevent it, to be prepared, for both of you to know what each other's triggers are. What situations, words, moments, or attitudes usually trigger that alarm, that discomfort, that overwhelm, that fear in the other person? Not all avoidant partners are the same. Not all anxious partners are the same. Each person has their own learning history, their experiences, their little traumas. So each one has to remember, review arguments, do some introspection, and make a list of situations, triggers, stimuli that tend to activate this alarm system. Like when I get home and see that you have a very serious face, that already activates this in me. Oh, well, for me it happens when I see that you try to change me or correct things about me. I feel threatened, invaded. And look, I've noticed that when I ask you a lot of questions, this also happens to you. It could be that it's also a trigger for you. You probably, when observing your partner, have noticed moments, situations, things you say or do that upset them, that activate this alarm system. So you can also help with their list of triggers. Can you do this task together? This way, in those moments when they happen, you won't let yourselves get caught up in the loop, in the alarm system, because you've already identified them. Do you know what your weak points are as a couple? Just by being aware of this and keeping it in mind, a big part of the work is already done. I'm telling you the truth, but we're still missing the fourth key, commitment. We both know our systems, we are triggers, we understand what's going on in each other's minds. We're not going to misinterpret and get upset automatically. But what do we do when that activation appears? I know I'm not supposed to add fuel to the fire, but what can I do to reduce that discomfort and anxiety? This is when we also have to, as a team, as a couple, make a series of pacts and agreements. What are we each going to do when these triggers, these situations come up? In this regard, it's especially important that each person clearly communicates to their partner what they need in that moment. Let me explain. We tend to point out what our partner does wrong, what they're lacking, what they need to change for something else, but we usually don't follow it up with a clear guideline. If your partner does something wrong, generally, here we're not talking about situations of abuse, mistreatment, manipulation, or being with the wrong partner. If your good partner does something wrong, it's because they don't know how to do it. So in that sense, it's part of your responsibility to give clear instructions about what you specifically need, because everyone is different. We shouldn't expect the other person to guess or read our minds. We can't expect everyone to feel the same way or have the same emotional needs. Part of getting to know each other is also giving each other instructions on how to interact with one another. For example, I get really anxious when I feel like we have a relationship problem, and instead of talking about it, you tell me we'll talk about it later. Yeah, well, I get overwhelmed because sometimes I need some time to think, to figure out how I feel. And when I ask you to give me a moment, what you do is follow me and keep insisting. I understand, it's just that in that moment, what I need is to know that this issue is important to you and that at some point we're going to talk about it. To me, it's obvious that I'm not leaving because I don't care about you. You know I love you, but if you need me to tell you in that moment, I will. It's no trouble for me. If I give you that reassurance, can you commit to giving me some time alone so I can reflect and process everything? Yes, a set amount of time for you to calm down and an agreement that we will talk about it, then I can calm down too. Great, so we'll do it that way next time. Someone here must be thinking. Yes, Claudia Nicolas' psychology, this example is nice, but when I discuss complex topics with my partner that we don't understand, it's not as perfect as in Disney movies. So, in this context, as the fifth key, I'm going to leave you this video on how to argue with your partner, with some tips that will make these moments of conflict, arguments, and misunderstandings much more pleasant, less hurtful, and also productive. I'll leave it for you at the end of this video. And to finish, let's go with the sixth key. Always repair. Healthy, happy, and strong relationships are not those that are completely free of conflicts, problems, and so on. They are the ones where there is so much trust, commitment, and teamwork that we have the peace of mind that after a conflict or a problem, we will come out of it together and even stronger. And that happens when we have ongoing experiences that after a misunderstanding or a conflict, there is repair. An open wound is not left behind. Let me explain. When we go through a difficulty, but then we talk about it together, we understand each other, we apologize, we acknowledge each other, and we affirm our relationship and our bond. bond. The brain learns that problems in a relationship are not so dramatic, not so threatening, not so dangerous. And so this will make the alarm system activate much less. It understands that it's part of the relationship, that you can stay calm, that you'll be able to handle it, and that things will turn out well. It doesn't get alarmed by alarms. However, when after an argument or misunderstanding, we do the typical thing of not talking to each other for a few hours or days, we act as if nothing happened, we avoid the topic or even punish ourselves, then conflict in the relationship will be associated with anxiety, fear, threat, rivalry, and so on. And this is going to greatly reinforce this anxious-avoidant loop. On the other hand, if every conflict ends in reconciliation and clarity, the brain learns. Yes, tensions may arise, but we return to our bond and our peace of mind, and that reduces future triggers. If there is no later repair, it's as if an emotional debt remains, and distrust, resentment, hypervigilance, and score settling increase. Repairing means taking responsibility for each person's part in what happens, understanding that we both build the relationship and expressing this to the other person. Repairing requires validating the other person's emotions and needs, letting your partner know that you truly understand, comprehend, and accept how they feel and what they need. I see you, I am considering you, I validate you. Repairing means expressing that we are still here, that the bond remains despite what happened, and it also means expressing that we are committed to the relationship, that next time we will do things differently, we agree on how we will do it, and we see that we have learned from it together. Repairing does not mean completely agreeing on everything, it does not mean giving in, it does not mean that one gives up and the other wins. It's simply a reminder that you are a team and that you are together against the conflicts, not against each other. When this is repeated, the brain learns that the relationship is a safe place, even during difficult times. And this is a great way to prevent future problems. Well, as you can see, in the end, this anxious-avoidant dynamic, it's an alarm system that's poorly coordinated, and the systems can be reconfigured with agreements, small behaviors, and constant repair. I hope that in this sense, this video has helped you, has allowed you to understand certain things, and has given you some tools. But as always, if you think you need some extra help in your relationship in that sense, you already know that I always believe much more in prevention when we detect problems than in trying to fix things when they are already unsustainable. You know that at my online clinic, Estar Contigo Therapy, we offer deep and quality therapy, but accessible to all budgets. And I'll leave you below the video on how to deal with conflicts in a relationship. Bye!